Hi everyone, Sid here, back in the bathroom, and yes, you read the title to this video correctly. I am going to start a Flat Earth series. I'm almost slightly less surprised than you are. I'm going to try to not get sidetracked by all these tangents that are in my head. So my goal with today's video is going to be just to give a bit of backstory and explain why I'm doing this series, and try to share what my goal or my vision, quote unquote, is with this series. So, my first exposure to flat Earth theory, let's do this chronologically, it was roughly, let's say 5 years ago at an old job that I was at, where a coworker of mine at the time presented me who basically said, "Hey Sid, you know, there's still people who believe that the Earth is flat today." And I Googled it, and I ended up spending that afternoon on the Flat Earth Society message board. And, you know, I looked at the model. I was kind of familiar. Well, I'm kind of familiar. I learned, you know, as much as I could. I've always been pretty curious that way. And that was that. I didn't really think about it much more until earlier this year, when a show that I listened to is the Freeman show. You know what? I'll put a link in the show under this video to that website. But there was a guy who was a guest pretty recently, actually. Actually, it was in 2015, called Jeffrey Grupp, who was a two-time guest on the Freeman show, and that was my other exposure to the flat Earth theory and the flat Earth model. And fast forward to November 7th, which is the quote-unquote real beginning of this series, where a little old show called Freedom Radio had a call-in show where a flat earther called in. And I listened to it the next day. I'm a really big fan of primary sources, so I wasn't content with watching the excerpt where he speaks to the flat earther. Again, look under this video for all relevant links. I'm not going to say this every time. I got a lot to go through. So, Stefan was, you know, chatting with this flat earth caller, and I was, again, as I just said, I'm pretty familiar with the model as of November 7th when I watched this. Actually, it was November 8th. And I found myself being really frustrated because obviously I clicked on to download that call-in show to see, because I was curious to see Stefan go sparring with a flat earther. However, I was severely left wanting because the caller in question was really terrible at making the case. And I say this with all due empathy because I've called in to live shows, and I've been nervous, you know, speaking to smaller audiences, so I can totally respect that. But the bottom line is there were some questions that was being lobbed at this guy that I could do a better job of answering. I'll be right back. So, long story short, the caller was so terrible at making the case for the flat Earth that I was determined. I told myself, you know what? There has to be someone out there who isn't terrible at making the case, so I'm going to go and I'm going to find this person. And that launched my exploration of the Zetetic flat Earth model. And I binged pretty solidly on flat Earth material by my own standards anyway. I consumed roughly, what was it? Yeah, I consumed about 8 to 9 hours of flat Earth content over the next 7 days. And I ended up finding a couple sources that I will link to below. I'm going to just name them, because these are names that were mentioned often enough that I, you know, felt it was easy to just type into YouTube search and find them. The one that I was originally going to mention, who was, to me, the first person in my opinion, to meet the isn't terrible at it criteria, was Eric Dubay. And the video that I'm going to link to under here is called 200 Proofs That the Earth is Not a Spinning Ball. Now again, my criteria was don't be terrible at it. And I think that this is something that I've encountered many times. There are a lot of compelling points in the flat Earth community, within the flat Earth movement, and I think that in this video, the 200 proofs the Earth is not a spinning ball, not all 200 proofs are equal. Let's just say that. One of them, he quotes scripture, which, if you're not a Christian, is basically bunkum. And regardless of what you think, though, personally, I would advise against watching that video in one sitting. I mean, I am really curious, and it might have been how tired I was that evening, but I noticed my eyes were glazing over a bit during the second half of the video, because, it's more than one argument per minute on average. So it's really a machine gun, like boom, 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 boom. And on top of it, I'm metric. So a lot of these anecdotes that are shared in this video are in imperial. And the one that leaps out at me, that I remember just going when I was watching it, was the guy that watched a 5-foot flag over 6 miles with a telescope 8 inches above the water, and I'm like, okay, like, for fuck's sake, I'm all confused. The other person that I'm going to mention, that I'm going to link to under this video, I'm going to link to the playlist, is Mark Sargent and his Flat Earth Clues. I think that, well, first of all, what I did, I didn't realize this, but I watched the Flat Earth Clues as one giant video. I didn't realize that it was a playlist that was just played end to end, although that does explain why the intro would repeat itself regularly throughout this 2-hour video. I'm linking to that because it's been a while since I watched it. It's about 2 months ago, but one thing is for sure, the Flat Earth Clues video is probably the one that's most often cited by flat earthers as being the one that made them curious or convinced them that we're living on a giant dinner plate, basically. But there's one thing that I want to make clear, though. I am not invested either way into what shape the Earth is in. And there's going to be an upcoming video as to why. But there's one thing that... The thing that surprised me the most about this exploration was my desire to keep going after I found these people that I mentioned. Like, in my mind, this was just going to be a quick video, but towards the end where I was reaching that 8th and 9th hour, where I was convinced that I had found at least 1 or 2 people who weren't god-awful at making the case, I just felt like I just kept going on, because there are 2 things. First of all, I am absolutely fascinated by this movement, because this is really new. I mean, the overwhelming majority of flat Earth videos out there are less than a year old. This is a recent resurgence of a pretty old theory. And that fascinates me. My inner sociologist is really fascinated by that. And the other thing is, I'm curious about the model. I mean, to me, and this ties a bit into my not being invested either way. To me, the value of a model is kind of twofold. the value of a model lies in its ability to explain phenomena that we know of, and also to make accurate predictions. So to me, whether we're living on a spinning ball or whether we're living on a stationary dinner plate, it doesn't make much difference as long as the model passed the tests of internal consistency and you can use it to make accurate predictions. So for now, as flat earthers would say, I'm holding on to my ball, but there is one thing that I want to say. If you are a flat earther watching this video, and I know there's going to be a bunch of you, first of all, thank you for bearing with me this long. And there's a couple things that I want you to keep in mind. First of all, you're gonna hate me at times throughout this series because I am a little trolly, honestly. Like my inner troll is well fed, and every now and then Sid the troll will leap up and take control of my mouth and even speak a complete sentence or two before I've realized what happened. So I ask that you understand that, but the bottom line is I really do relate with you and your situation. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to dedicate the next video as to going into that. I'm going to lead with the olive branch, so to speak, to really explain why I feel there's a lot of common ground between me and flat earthers in general. However, I respect you enough to call you on your bullshit, and I've found significant amounts of bullshit within the flat earth media that I've consumed, and so basically after I've led with the olive branch, I might let the sword go buck wild. So that one you're gonna despise me, but there's one thing that I really implore you. If at any point during this series you decide to click away and say, fuck this guy, I ask you please come back for a video that I'm going to do as soon as is reasonably possible, which is a message to flat earthers. That video is actually the goal that made me so excited in starting this series in the first place. So no matter what happens, again, if at any point you say, fuck off, and just click away, please come back for that video, if only that one. And what else? Did I cover everything? Yeah, I did. So thank you very much for watching. I'm surprised at how on point I stayed. I was really not expecting to have this much to say about it, so I will see you soon. I don't know if my next video is going to be part 2 or whatever, but this is definitely, I'm glad to have started it. So please feel free to like and share. Leave comments below. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you're anxious about or not. And you can find links to my Twitter and my Tumblr underneath here. So with that, I will bid you farewell. I will see you soon, and you take care. Later.